Fenrir, Scene 8, Take Infinity. Action.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the History and Mystery channel. I'm your host, Ragnarok, and I want you to like and subscribe. Now that you've done that, I want to delve into the story of the gigantic wolf and god slayer who they called Fenrir, the wolf son of Loki and father of Skoll and Hati. In this video, we will focus on the written tale of Fenrir, and most of my information comes from a book that was written by an Icelandic poet named Snorri Sturluson. Snorri wrote in his book the Proza-Edda, prose versions of the Norse mythology. This book was written in the year 1220. My second main source of information was the Poetic Edda, which is an untitled collection of Old Norse poetry. So, for today I divided our video into 4 parts, and those 4 parts are Fenrir's birth and origins, the imprisonment of Fenrir, Fenrir's children Skoll and Hati, Ragnarok and Fenrir's destiny. So let's start. According to myths and legend, Fenrir was the wolf son of the trickster god Loki and the witch Angrboda. Loki and Angrboda used to live deep in the forest of Jotunheim, which was the realm of the giants and the birthplace of their 3 children. Their 3 children were called Fenrir, Jormungandr and Hel. Fenrir was the firstborn son and he would become a gigantic wolf. The second child would also be a son, called Jormungandr, and he would later become the Midgard serpent. And the last child will be a daughter named Hel, who was born as a half-dead entity. From birth, Fenrir would show to be extremely intelligent, but also wicked at the time. Fenrir, Jormungandr and Hel would live for a brief time in peace in their mother's great hall, which was located in Jotunheim. However, when the Aesir discovered the existence of Loki's children, they also discovered a prophecy, which would tell them that Loki's children would bring a great amount of terror during Ragnarok, also known as the end of the world and the beginning of a new one. Now that Odin knew of this prophecy, he would make a plan to prevent it from happening. The first step in this plan was that the Aesir declared the 3 children of Loki as monsters, and they would not let such a great threat go unchallenged. And even though they were still younglings, the Aesir started to make a plan to capture them. During the middle of the night, the Aesir sneaked into the great hall of Angrboda. Once they entered the hall, the first thing they will do is look for the children's bedroom. And when they found them, they kidnapped all of the 3 children. Now that Jormungandr, Fenrir and Hel were captured, the Aesir brought them to Asgard, where Odin, the All-Father, would decide their fate. Jormungandr would be the first one to be dealt with. He was thrown into the oceans of Midgard. There he would grow slowly and eventually become so big that he would encircle the entire earth and bite his own tail, turning him into a perfect ring around Midgard. Hel was thrown into Niflheim, the land of the unworthy warriors and people who died from old age, which was seen as the death of a coward. Hel was doomed to rule over these lands for an eternity. The last one to get his punishment was Fenrir, and he would be kept in Asgard as a prisoner. In the beginning, Fenrir wouldn't think of himself as being a prisoner of the Aesir. Only much later he would realize this. During his younger years in Asgard, when Fenrir was just a wolf cub, Tyr, the god of law and order, would care for him. Each day, Tyr would bring fresh meat and play with the young Fenrir. This all doesn't sound or look like an imprisonment, but that would all change. Because the prophecy, which tells us about Fenrir's role during Ragnarok, kept hunting the minds of the Aesir, and when they saw how fast in strength and size Fenrir was growing, they decided that it was time to find a way to really imprison Fenrir. Because of Fenrir's enormous strength, the Aesir had to come up with a trick to imprison him. So the gods decided to chain him up, but they knew that they had to keep Fenrir calm if they wanted it to be successful. So instead of just brutally attacking him, they decided to make it into a game in which Fenrir could test his own strength by breaking out of the chains in which the gods tried to restrain him. The first 2 times would be unsuccessful, and Fenrir broke through the chains so easily that he made it look like the chains were made of feathers. For the 3rd time, the gods decided to work with the dwarves and let them make the strongest chain ever made. but with the appearance of a weak and thin chain. Now that they had the chain, the gods confronted Fenrir again, but now Fenrir became suspicious, and he would only accept the challenge if one of the gods would put their arm in his mouth, so that he could rip it off if he couldn't escape. Knowing that this would mean the loss of an arm, the gods were hesitant to volunteer. Only one god was brave enough to do it. Fenrir's old carekeeper, Tyr. The gods started to chain Fenrir up, and sure enough, Fenrir realized he couldn't escape. So naturally, he decided to rip Tyr's arm off. The now chained up Fenrir got tied up to a boulder, and a sword was placed in his mouth to keep it open. Fenrir would marry a giantess named Larnvidia, and Fenrir's father, Loki, would turn her into a she-wolf so that they could mate. And after some time went by, Larnvidia would give birth to 2 giant wolf sons. These sons would be named Skoll and Hati. Skoll had black fur, which represented death, and Hati was born with white fur, which represented life. In Norse mythology, they are seen as a reminder that everything is connected in the cycle of life and death. The 2 wolves would also teach us self-determination and power to reach your goals. They teach us this by their own determination to complete the tasks that they were given, because the sons would receive the task of chasing after the sun and chasing after the moon. Skoll would chase after the 2 horses named Arvakr and Elsfjord. These horses would drag a chariot containing the sun through the skies of Midgard. And Hati would chase after a chariot which contained the moon god Mani. These chariots were given by Odin to the sun god Sol and the moon god Mani. Odin gave these chariots so that they could quickly cross the sky once a day. By doing this, they would provide day and night time to the world. There was only one thing that Odin didn't foresee, and that was that the gods were easily distracted. The sun loved watching powers of nature, like the waves crashing on the cliffs, and the moon loved watching all the things that the humans were doing. Because of these actions, day and nighttime would get out of control, and no one would know when to sleep or when to be awake. After noticing this, Odin got furious at the gods and threatened them with his magic spear. Sol and Mani knew that they were the only ones capable of doing the job, so they didn't take Odin's threats serious. But all this would change when Loki came up with an idea, and he told Odin that he had 2 grandchildren that could be of use. He spoke to Skoll and Hati and offered them a task, and as a reward for completing their task, he allowed his grandchildren to swallow up the moon and the sun. The 2 brothers didn't waste any time and started chasing after the moon and the sun. Thanks to their pursuit, the sun and moon would get back to their usual course. And this meant that day and night became balanced again. That all sounds good and joyful, but let's not forget, if the 2 brothers would catch their prey, they would swallow them up, which would cause the world to be pulled into a new ice age. And the legend also tells us that the devouring of the sun and moon would mean the start of Ragnarok. And now that we are talking about Ragnarok, I think that it's time for our last part. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are again at the end of times that the Vikings would call Ragnarok. And it all starts with Fenrir's sons, Skoll and Hati, who have been hunting through the skies for what seems like an eternity, but now they finally catch their prey. Skoll devours the sun, and Hati devours the moon. The sky turns dark, and even the stars will start to disappear, leaving nothing but a black void in the heavens. The Yggdrasil, the tree of life that holds the cosmos together, will tremble. This causes an eruption of earthquakes that are so strong that even the mountains will fall to the ground. Now that all this chaos is erupting in the universe, the chains that were holding Fenrir captive are starting to break, and Fenrir will escape his imprisonment. And now that Fenrir is on the loose, also another one of Loki's sons will escape his sentence. Jörmungandr, the mighty serpent that encircles the land, starts to rise up from the deep, creating tsunamis that will flood the lands. Thanks to the sea spilling over onto the land, a ship called Naglfar breaches the land, and the captain of this ship would be none other than Loki. Now that Fenrir is on the loose, he starts to run across the world with fire blazing from his eyes and nostrils. He starts to open up his mouth, which causes his lower jaw to touch the earth and his upper jaw to touch the sky. This made sure that Fenrir starts to devour everything that's on his path. Now that all these things are happening around the universe, the Aesir gods will prepare themselves for a battle under the leadership of Odin. When the gods arrived at the battlefield, Odin came face to face with Fenrir, the giant wolf. And as we know, they fought fiercely against each other, but at the end, Fenrir would win and devour Odin. Watching in the distance while all this was happening was Odin's son, Vidar, and he will try to do anything in his power to avenge the death of his father. The now enraged Vidar jumps into Fenrir's mouth and will keep it open with the help of a special made shoe that was made especially for this event. Now that Vidar could hold Fenrir's mouth open, he grabs his sword and stabs it through the throat of the giant wolf. This stab would mean the end of Fenrir and also the end of our story. I want to thank you all for listening. See you in the next one. And remember, history is written in mystery.